If you look at all the stock image websites like Adobe and Shutterstock and maybe Getty, but Getty is kind of on the fence right now. If you look at others, they take a look at the most liked, or I think the most sold images on these websites. And currently, these are almost all AI generated. The best selling images on the stock image websites are AI generated.
Hey, and welcome back to the official YouTube channel for A16Z Games. My name is Les, your host. Today's episode is a follow-on to our first episode on generative AI. Where that episode was more of a primer on what the technology is, today is a conversation with the founder building a company at the direct intersection of games and generative AI. Emmanuel, or M, is the co-founder and CEO of Scenario.gg. Scenario.gg is a product that empowers game designers to utilize generative AI for the sake of building in-game assets. It's a cool sneak peek into the future of what generative AI in games looks like, from production speed to budgets to philosophies to really what artists are saying. So sit back, relax. If you like the content, please do leave a comment or subscribe to the channel. We really do appreciate it. All right, see you next time. This isn't your first time building a company.
Yeah.
One of your last companies was kind of in also the tech data world. I believe it was around UAVs and kind of like drone data. The only UAVs I know about are 3-kill Call of Duty kill streaks. But doing a little bit more research, it sounded like you were in a very different space than gaming. Like, what can you just talk a little bit about that journey going from drone data, agriculture, mining, construction into how really that intersects with gaming and generative AI?
Yeah, there's a link. In both cases, the technology makes people's life easier. That's it. But then you said drones. My previous company was about making the software to process massive amount of data captured by drones, like thousands of images per flight that needed to be gathered in 2D, in 3D, analyzed. AI was involved to detect any kind of insights within these big data sets. And my CTO at Scenario was specifically working on that with me in the past. And then I sold that company actually a few years ago. And then I saw, what was that, like 2 years ago, Apple going out with a LiDAR on their phones. And LiDAR was also used on drones. So I realized people would be scanning the world, not just with drones, but with phones, with mobile phones. That would lead to potentially a lot of user-generated 3D content. And I felt it was very interesting. So for about a year, with Scenario, when I started Scenario, the initial vision was to think of all these smartphones in everybody's pocket as content generation engines. And so we made that app, Scenario 3D, for anybody to scan stuff with their phone and then use that for game assets. Edit the model, replace the texture, combine different scans together. Think of it like a kind of like an Instagram for 3D or a TikTok for 3D when you remix your models with others. And that was pretty nice. But then when I saw first, I think DALL-E or Midjourney coming up by like mid last year, I realized that would be an even more powerful engine to create content than just scanning. Like scanning takes maybe a minute, maybe two, to scan an object or a room. Generative AI is like 5, 10, 15 seconds. So that's how we pivoted the company about 4 or 5 months ago. We knew about Gen AI. We were using textures made with Gen AI to replace the texture of the scan. But now it was not about the texture anymore. It was about like any asset. Does it make sense or?
Well, 100%.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So where did gaming really intersect with some of that?
So I've been first of all, like lots of people scanning objects with their phones. We're able to use them in games, and we even within Scenario a way to build a game with your scans. So maybe you're a kid and you have Legos, and you could scan your Legos to create these mini games with other your friends' Legos. That was like the concept. But otherwise, I've been playing for a long time. Started in like '95 with like RTS, RPG games, like really old school games that I still love and sometimes still play. And then I had kids for the past 10 years. They're still here, but I stopped playing as much recently. Yeah. But I've always been playing a lot.
So it's interesting. You're kind of in this like 3D space that right now, like a lot of the output is kind of like in this 2D world or text to image, but most of the images are still, for the most part, like the space is mostly being generated in the 2D worlds, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, at least in AI generation right now, it's mostly 2D. Right. I mean, like when it comes to domains that are cracked, like 2D is the one that's right now, and then text is still like on its way. I would say image is probably approaching a global maxima in terms of how good these models can be. Sure, every so often they have a hand with 6 fingers or the teeth get messed up, but even artists have a hard time with those aspects. Text and image is where it is right now. I would say 3D is in its research phase. So like you see models like Pointy or Diffusion and stuff like that are the first iteration of what I would say 3D models look like, but the holy grail is coming. I'd say within the year, we probably see like foundation models of similar quality to DALL-E 2 for 3D. Yeah.
Completely agree with that. Yeah. And if you can do 2D to 3D, if you can first select the image, the style you like, and transfer that to 3D, it's even more powerful than going straight from text to 3D, because the variability that we should expect from text to 3D might be higher than 2D to 3D. So there will be an interesting pipeline to develop and to find in the next few months.
Well, so far I've been like personally playing with Midjourney and kind of the text to image and figuring out how to be more unique or specific about my prompts. A lot of the scenario kind of workflow is first, it's all image based, right? Could you talk about kind of how a user really touches your product right now?
Yeah, so the specificity of the product is that it lets people train their own AI models. And to be more precise, it lets people fine-tune a specific model, which is Stable Diffusion today. And fine-tuning means bring data they own or they have or they buy and generate a model that will be consistent, that will provide consistent output per the training data. And it's extremely important to for people that once you pass that exploration phase and you enter the production phase, you really need to elaborate and iterate around a specific art direction, art style, concept, and prompt engineering alone, the one on Midjourney, the one on Dream Studio, might not get you there. That's where you might need a specific custom trained model that you made.
Makes total sense. So you're helping kind of create generators or models that, goes beyond just a simple prompt, and that can kind of like then be shared presumably by big teams and individuals. Like how are your users using it right now?
It obviously depends, but we've called them generators because they generate images. Obviously, technically they are AI models, and they could be for concept art, they could be for backgrounds, they could be for characters, they could be for prompts. Where I gave an example of potions on Twitter that went viral. They could be on skins. They are like, we're seeing literally thousands of people coming up with each, dozens of ideas. And they tried in every situation, whether it's the building, the character, the object, they try to really iterate around a specific shape, color, style, touch, and I think it's going to be how the game assets will be designed in the future. Like start with training data, iterate with prompt around that training data, and then probably like you could also use not just text but also an image, which is called image to image. So the output will be inspired not just by your prompt, but also by an image that you feed the system with. And by the way, that's something that also Midjourney is kind of allowing on Discord. Yeah.
And you're using a method, it's like one part fine-tuning, but you're also using some other models like DreamBooth, is that right?
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about what DreamBooth is and the technicals around like kind of how it works?
Yeah, so DreamBooth is a package released by Google, a team at Google, back in September, that lets you fine-tune a diffusion model. It could be Stable Diffusion, it could be another model. The thing is, and that's an interesting entrepreneurship story. Back in September, we saw coming up Stable Diffusion, open source, on GitHub for free, and DreamBooth, same thing, open source, and the two can be combined to create your own mini version of Stable Diffusion per your own data. And so that's indeed we leverage DreamBooth, and then DreamBooth went pretty successful for AI avatars with product like Lensa recently. So in that case, DreamBooth is being used with pictures of your face. So the model that is being generated is the model that recognizes your face and then transform the face into all kinds of crazy images. But the same concept could be applied for another character, a building, a world, again, an object, and so on. It's the same concept.
So as kind of like companies are figuring out how to make the user experience more accessible, there's probably a whole cohort of people that could be the best model makers in digital weaponry or hands or eyes or even more specific features like deeper than just a face.
Oh yeah, any feature. It could be all the way down to like a small icon, a badge, really detailed. We even see creators on Scenario trying to create AI, generate all the elements, and then they combine them into Photoshop or any other design software. But if they use the same generator, they might end up with the same style for each element. And try doing that in Stable Diffusion, plain vanilla version, or Midjourney is pretty hard. Yeah.
And a big aspect of making these models is the data that you get that goes into the model, the training data that you have. A lot of it's open source, but a lot of it is proprietary within the companies that you're working with. Could you talk a little bit about what makes a model better than something else? Is it about the data? Is it about the compute? Is it about the architecture? What do you think matters most there?
It's super interesting, and we are still finding out ourselves and the users, and that's what's fascinating. And that's why I think building in public is so important, because we see people on Discord coming up with ideas that we've been trying to crack for a few weeks, and all of a sudden, boom, somebody shows up and says, hey, here's like a character design model sheet that's perfect with like front, back, side, everything. So people are still finding out, the right processes. What matters? You've got one training data, somebody's training data. And we are not talking about billions of images like Lion 5B, this big database, or others. We're talking about 10, 20, 50 pictures, as long as the pictures are consistent around a certain thing. And consistency also comes with some variability within that data set. There has to be a way for the AI to iterate around different elements. If it's only the same, whatever shape, the model will overfit. We can speak to that as well. So consistent data, 10, 20 pictures, 50 pictures, enough variability, the right training parameters, like how long you train a model can matter. It's a fine tuning. Sometimes you have to train it enough, but not too much in order for the model not to overfit. And then once you get the model, then you iterate with different inferences and settings for the image generation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The one way that I've always thought about thinking about fine-tuning in foundation models is thinking about gamers at large. Like generally gamers are good at a lot of different games. Like Lester used to be like one of the best Halo players of all time. If you throw him in any other FPS, he'll be good at FPSs. But he might not be good at, say, like a real-time strategy game. If you got Lester to play that real-time strategy game, give him a bunch of training data and a bunch of different examples, he could fine-tune his model onto the rules of that game and become better at it over time. But if you introduced a bunch of crappy data, say, for example, bad examples, say like he was watching a Twitch stream of somebody who was losing every game, he might not actually become better at that game. So the foundation model for Lester is he's a good gamer. Fine-tuning might be him playing other games and getting new training data and then kind of adjusting based off of that.
Yeah. And being a fine-tuned creator might be a new job, by the way, because it requires some skills. It requires some artistic understanding.
It reminds me a lot, I think we were speaking a little bit before about kind of sprites and early kind of like many very variable, but like when creating little sprites and GIFs and like the 2D kind of like early gaming days, I remember I would have like my AOL Instant Messenger, like little icon be a sprite, and I'd like download the whole sprite sheet of, a character, a video game character that I liked. But it like what you said kind of reminded me about like the artist making a whole sheet, which then turns into the 20, 30 images of the data that then can get plugged into whatever, a generator, and the output can, I think right now, be like 2D variations or imaginations, but maybe in the future 3D or beyond?
Possibly. And what's interesting today, an artist typically, or a creator, makes an asset, 2D or 3D, and sells that asset, maybe on the store or maybe straight to a customer. But why not selling the generator, making a certain style, a certain category of assets? And you could sell the generator itself, or you could sell the right to use the generator. You could like rent or lease it, whatever. And it would be a new way for artists to make money, not by selling the final art, but by selling the tool that makes art per their idea. And that's a great way to explore.
I love that concept of the AI creator economy that's blossoming right now. There are a bunch of different indie hackers who make their own models. Say, for example, someone on Scenario makes a model for weaponry in their game. That model is informed by their training data, which they made themselves. And then that model might be better than any other model that exists out there in the landscape today. So people will be willing to pay for that. This could additionally apply to, say, somebody who made a better copyright generator or somebody who made a better email writer generator. People are willing to pay for the API calls to this model because they don't have access to the data themselves. So these things like maybe on Hugging Face or Replicate that serve as aggregators of the models. And what you can do is you can pay for API calls now. So Replicate's a good example of this. You can pay $10 a month for a subscription to get very simple API calls. And what they can do is they can associate where you're calling the APIs to the models that are being generated. And the people will want to put their models on these platforms in order to make money in the future.
Passive income.
Passive, yeah, exactly.
Which is a dream for artists.
Well, I mean, that's also a really interesting, yes. And it's also a really interesting point because people monetize their intelligence in different ways in the past. You could do it by, say, renting your time out for like $50 an hour to like do a job. Or you could like turn it into a box, like literally put your intelligence in a machine and then have that work for you on the side as passive income. You host it on one of these platforms and people call your intelligence whenever they need it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you combine that with crypto, you could also authenticate somehow. You could authenticate the assets coming out of a certain generator and link that generator to the creator of the generator. And that might be, by the way, that might be a person, that might be a community, it might be a group, might be a DAO. So it's not something we've explored yet, but we've heard people from the Web3 community that we meet here every day talking about that.
It's incredible how fast I think the kind of speed of innovation is happening at like how many businesses purely are being opened up through just this discussion of like this, the introduction of generative AI. And I think the appetite for people to think about the business specifically about how to, like, whether it's an artist level, an API call, or kind of like the Hugging Faces of the world, or kind of I don't know what I would say, like interface, like companies dedicated around making the whole usability or the more like approachability of all these models a little bit easier. Can you speak a little bit about like what the business of AI is right now? Like what are defensible businesses? What are innovative businesses? Like where, like what does the business of this technology really look like right now? And maybe let's just start there. Like how do you make money? Is it mostly from these API calls? Is it just like the artists making money, or?
I can take a crack. I mean, like there are businesses across the entire stack. Like say if you start all the way at the bottom, there's the GPU providers, like literally NVIDIA. You go up a stack, there's like the cloud providers, say like the CoreWeaves or the GCPs of the world. You go up a stack, maybe there's the foundation model providers. You go up a level, then there's the, say, fine-tuning providers. Then there's the MLOps and DevOps providers. And then there's the end user tools, which might be something like Scenario. For each of these different layers, there's different business models. In the case of NVIDIA, or like in the case of like cloud providers, you're paying based off of usage. In the case of NVIDIA, like you buy their GPUs. In the case of something like Scenario, you might pay like a subscription model. But across the entire stack, like what really matters is that there is productive capital being generated. Like people are working, like they're able to do more given AI, which means that they can spend their time either creating more things or they can spend it doing other things. And what that means is there's like literal productive capital being generated. So like where does that go in the economy? And it's just a matter of the companies being able to capture that in some way. What's been interesting so far is that a lot of the productivity gains that have happened at the model layers, but they actually haven't captured the value reciprocally to the value that they're generating. Where what we're observing now is that their tools like Scenario or Jasper or what have you are actually capturing the value. And then additionally on the other side, it's almost like a barbell strategy where NVIDIA and the end users are capturing the value, but the real value is generated in the middle with like the foundation models. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the future. It's my belief that over time they will capture a growing percentage of value because they build network effects. So like Stable Diffusion is a great example of this. They're almost like the focal point in a larger network of apps. So DreamBooth is a great example. We've mentioned that, but there's a whole bunch of other apps like Lexica. I think they come into FDOT pretty often. What ends up happening is Stable Diffusion becomes like almost like an OS of like every other piece of software built atop of it. So it becomes really hard to rip out eventually. So that's actually a good question for Emmanuel. Like, can you switch off of Stable Diffusion? Like if there was a better, like what would be the process for you? Well, one, you should probably answer Lester's question as well. I would love to hear your take. But also, what would it take for you to go from Stable Diffusion to say like, if Midjourney open sourced their model and you found that it was better?
Lots of questions here. That's great questions. First, I agree with the layers that you described. As someone that raised money recently, I got the questions about defensibility and moat a lot, and I can speak to that. We definitely are more on the end user side of things, which doesn't mean at some point we will not try to also make our own models ourselves at some point, and if that's necessary. If these models are tailored to a certain industry, like gaming, like game assets.
Right.
Like today, Stable Diffusion is for anything, and same for Midjourney, right? By the way, Jasper, that built an amazing app, very convenient app, started leveraging the OpenAI API before starting developing their own models. So there will be games wars in the next few months where people will try to play above or below in the stack, and we'll see where the final equilibrium, but balance will be established. I think the moat comes from the network effects more than the large language models. They're amazing. There are only a few of them today, but we should expect many of them to pop up in the next few months or years. Like everybody's working on them, so there will be hyper verticalization of language models.
So just to back up, what are the most popular large language models? Like
for image generation, you have DALL-E, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, and then you have one from Google, not too much used so far, Imagen, and then others that are less important, and then you have GPT-3 for text.
GPTJ. There are a bunch of bespoke model providers, things like Cohere, and then a bunch of things that are in the background lurking, but we've seen stuff on Twitter like Anthropic that have built their own LLMs.
And just to telescope back one more step, all these models are based on similar data sets or unique data sets, or when you talk about these big five, the models are built on training data, and some of that is either super big, or can you talk about that layer below as well?
It's really big. So for Stable Diffusion, it's been a database called Lion 5B, 5B for 5 billion images. There has been a few versions of Lion 5B, which relate to the version of Stable Diffusion as well. Stable Diffusion 1.5, 2.0, 2.1. And 5 billion images is a lot, which, by the way, triggers a lot of questions around IP and so on. And then on DALL-E, I think it's a few, like 500, 600 million. And for Midjourney, it's not quite open or public yet.
It's unclear.
Who owns Lion, or is that just
doesn't Stability support the Lion Foundation? It's open source.
It's a foundation. Yeah. So Lion is a German public foundation, which has a bunch of activities, including scrapping a lot of images on the internet and gathering that database. But first as an academic institution that then was leveraged by Stability.
Yeah. And what we're observing now is a lot of these models are trying to differentiate on data. So they face like two questions. The first question
is 5 billion a lot? Like when you say 5 billion, that's a lot of images, but at the same time, I'm like, is that a lot of images?
They're all captioned.
Yeah. It's a lot.
It's not just the image.
It's the metadata and everything.
Yeah. Like I think the biggest text data set in the world is 1.3 trillion tokens, or at least the largest I've seen in papers. And a token is essentially just like 2 characters in a row, like optimized for these large language models. It's essentially all of the text on the internet. So a lot of these models now are trying to like differentiate on data, or at least the data that goes into their models. So in the case of, say, something like a Midjourney, they're making prettier images. The question is like, how? Are they doing like prompt engineering magic on the back end, or are they only training on like Lion pretty? There's like a separate data set of Lion that's only like human labeled pretty data, like pretty images. And when you introduce a human into the loop, you can you can get a differentiated data. Another good example of this is GPT chat. So GPT chat was just GPT 3.5 with an instruct tuning. But what they introduced was RLHF, which is reinforcement learning based on human feedback. So they literally had humans go in, look at the AI generations and say, this one's good, this one's bad. And then they had AI rank the generations based off of that. And then a whole nother layer of like humans in the loop. So GPT chat was only able to differentiate on the training data that it had, and then also the user interface that it presented in, which is like this chatbot interface. So that's one of the big angles of differentiation now. But then the question becomes like, all the data more or less is just scrubbed from on the internet. It's like there's like a fixed amount of data on the internet, and like sure every day we might get like a little bit more, but the internet's been around for over 20 years now. So that's not where you can differentiate. Where you're differentiating is like having creative ways to find new data. So one really interesting way to find new data is like scraping YouTube for say video data, and then also scraping YouTube for the text data. So you run like transcription on like say this podcast or say like a Minecraft video. Like a really good example of this is they were able to backtrack a Minecraft user's actions by watching a video on their playing behavior. So it's like, oh, if this person moved it forward in 3D space, they probably pushed the W key on their keyboard. So then they get new data from data that already exists on the internet. So I'm excited about it, and this is like an important aspect because when it comes to making better models, the biggest bottleneck right now is on data, and we're kind of bottlenecked on the data that exists. So you have to be creative about finding new data or paying for new data.
Oh, we are entering synthetic data for training AI models as well.
Yeah,
like you completely kind of AI generates synthetic data that will be used with the right filters and so on to retrain new algorithms or new models.
Self-improving AI is happening right now. It's like literally AI that generates its own data. It fine-tunes itself on the best data that it generates. This is actually Anthropic's approach, I think, is they have a constitution that they write and say like, okay, based off of these rules, like a human goes and says like, based off of these rules, this is the constitution. We're going to generate data. And then based off of the best generator, based off of the Constitution's rules, we will do this kind of GPT chat reinforcement learning loop, but without the humans, it's an AI doing it. So instead of RLHF, it's like reinforcement learning based on AI. So it's like RLAI. But yeah, self-improving AIs is going to be really cool. Synthetic data is going to be a really big angle towards making these models better in the future.
Did you think you'd ever go from technology that was assisting real-life mining, construction, and agriculture to synthetic data discovery and, I don't know, tuning and pruning?
No, that wasn't expected. But tech leads you to unexpected places, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I moved from France to California. I should have expected the unexpected, right? I guess.
Welcome.
Yeah. And you said human reinforcement. That's big moat to build, and that's why the companies or the companies that are on the end user side of the spectrum, they can benefit from a lot of reinforcement learning. Midjourney being a huge example for that. 8 million people on the Discord, biggest Discord server on the planet, and they all prompt like literally, I'm not sure what the amount is, it's huge, like per second. And then from this prompt, the same users select the images they like the most. They upscale, they create variants, and just like every click is a learning for Midjourney.
So I actually did this in my time at YouTube. For a long time, we were trying to figure out within games what was esports and what wasn't. And that's very hard because when you look at video content and you look at, just say, like casual League of Legends or casual StarCraft, this is for the purpose of like surfacing, like, you know, competitive gameplay in certain areas of the platform. I was kind of like a monkey behind like a huge data set. I was not only finding the content and having to find, both true and false, like esports, not esports content. I generated a whole list, and then I, went through 1,000 videos being like, oh, this is competitive because this is this team versus this team, or not. But more of the story is, I was pretty prone to, like, most of it was correct, but sometimes I would get it wrong, or sometimes I could get it wrong. And what was difficult was like keeping it consistent because there was always new games or there was new teams, and all the things that I used in my head, like logically, it's like, oh, this is like this team or this league or this, specific game. I could easily get to that level, but I'm curious how a whole, user base, not just consuming content or creating content, but verifying content, or who are all the people. It's like cool to talk about the technology, but at some point it probably comes back to a human or like a whole bunch of humans at some point, right?
there are service providers who will go in and label data for you. Like the biggest example that I know of is Skill AI. We'll have like a whole bunch of different services to either find you data, I've lost a pen, find you data, label your data, and a bunch of different solutions. It always does come back to a human. Where it becomes interesting is like where you have humans label some of the data, and then you have AI learn the rules by which the human labeled the data, and then you have an AI label it. A good example of this is like Tesla. So Tesla, say when someone crashes, something went wrong, right? Like that's a failure case, and usually those failure cases happen at edge cases. So what they do is they go in and then they label everything that happened in that scene from here's the car, here's the speed, here's the cone, et cetera. What they learn is that well, also over time, there's just like so many crashes that you can't label all of them. And then additionally, they learn what the edge cases look like based off of the crashes. So then there's similar cases that exist in the data set.
That never existed before, though.
Yeah,
Too, right? Like, could they predict like predictable, like future cases based off of that data too?
Yes, exactly. So they can both recognize a high risk situation and then also generate similar high risk situations in the past. And then what they can do is based off of the human labels of the cones and cars, they can make an AI say, okay, this is probably what a cone looks like in this other high risk situation. Here's the speed, et cetera. So it's like the AI is learning the human labeling skills. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was just listening, and I think it was recently, a few months ago, maybe a year ago, like the Tesla predicting the crash would happen even though the driver would not have at all detected anything based on like two cars that were like far away ahead doing something wrong, and the Tesla detected it. Right?
It's like precognition,
kind of.
Like it's some weird minority report, like it's going to happen. And you're like, no, it's not. And then it's like, yes, it is. With
the Tesla just understands something in the air. It's like it smells crash coming.
Well, I want to bring it back to the business cases. So okay, models like I liked what you said about like models could be the new OSs. Like what happens if an OS potentially goes away, or like you kind of explained building your own kind of model. Like is that it, or is there still so many more opportunities on the front end, or the like the interface end, or the usability? I just want to paint a picture for all the viewers, like the extent of how much more development we have across the entire spectrum of the business.
And nobody has the full picture and the answers yet, but this is what I would say. Networks have not, except maybe Midjourney, I'm not sure networks have reached the scale they need to reach for image generation and to better understand what the right prompts are, what the right training data are, and so on. So we still need to build even stability. I mean, though they're pretty big, right? But I think we still have a few months, if not maybe a few years, to learn more from that huge network of users. And I think, Midjourney made a pretty darn good job by cracking the code and going to Discord. But Discord might not be the interface for a lot of users, including enterprise or entities or organizations. Discord is more for the individual user. Look, so there are still many opportunities to develop on the like large enterprise side of things, with questions around data security, data privacy, IP, copyrightability, integrations, and so on. So there's still a lot of value to develop and a lot of tech to develop to dig that value. That makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
Million low-hanging fruit that exists today, for sure.
Yeah,
this is not the final state. Oh boy, it's coming, and it's coming fast. Like, if you think GPT-3 is the final answer for text models, like just wait until it solves like 95% of like coding questions just based off of the context in your like VS Code file. There's a lot, like it can't even do math right now. Like can't do 4-digit addition that well. There's a lot coming. So like I would say like the current OS level of models is going to change. What I find interesting is that the current OS providers, say like OpenAI, Stable Diffusion, what have you, they're updating their models because they start to realize that you can increase the model accuracy faster by releasing new generations of them just on more compute and more data faster than they can self-improve. So like all the human labeling on GPT chat will be nice, and maybe they can service their own fine-tuning data that might improve the model. But what actually improves the model quicker is just making it bigger with more data and more compute. So that's going to change. And then there's a whole bunch of other layers of the stack that are going to change as well. Like literally every single day, I see a new vertical application that blows my mind. We have a chat at A16Z of just like us sending like mind-blowing applications to each other. Like the most recent one was something that learned the actual contents of a paper just by reading it in a second and then updating its model to learn more things. Or the other day I saw one that was like GPT backend that was built at a Scale AI hackathon. So sick. LangChain is a great example of something where it's like you're using LLMs and then a whole bunch of other things in the stack to create, essentially using LLMs to finish products, but you don't really need the LLM for all of the aspects. It understands what it's good at and what it's bad at. Like every single day there's something cool happening. It's hard to fathom what it's going to look like in a year. I used to be able to like predict what was going to happen, and now it's at a point where it's just like it's snowballed way too fast, out of control. Now I'm just sitting here surprised every day. Like in the past year, I was like, oh, that was expected. Oh, that was expected. Now it's like I'm mind blown every day.
And for a founder, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
It's just exhausting. I mean, at some point when I remember that period in November. Do you remember that? Like every day there was a news. Like in November, it was exhausting. And as a founder, you're like, wow, is it new? Should I jump in? Should I just ignore? Should I just get inspired? And like every day, a few news. And then during late December, of course, the Christmas break, it went a bit like slower. And I was expecting 2023 to be maybe okay. And it picked up again, like mid-January, like recently. And you see it on Twitter, and you see it on Discord and on Reddit, and it's non-stop. Have you seen Pix2Pix, like just a few days ago?
No.
There you
tell me
go.
about it.
Oh, it's amazing. It's like just one style transfer. It's a whole new model, style transfer to just in one image, one prompt, and you like style transfer on whatever you want. Think of it like, okay,
Was
let's
this
take an example.
did a research lab release it?
I would have to dig further. Like it came up like 2 days ago, and I've seen the results are pretty amazing. You could take the sprite sheet. You have a sprite sheet of Mega Man, running, jumping, whatever. And you take the same sprite sheet, which might not even be high resolution, and you just say, make it Superman. And the same Mega Man will be Superman. That's it. Same sprite sheet, same pose, same everything.
Yeah. How fast? Like super, like incredibly fast?
Yeah, like seconds, like 10, 15 seconds, depending on the server load usually and things like that. So it's already on the Hugging Face. So I think it was published. And then you wait like 2 days, 48 hours, it's on Hugging Face already. And then you've got companies integrating it and so on. So
and someone builds a derivative model. And just like boom, boom, like these platforms like Hugging Face and Replicate just really improve the speed of iteration in the field so much. And Arxiv too, like all of these things. And GitHub, of course. Like,
it's like all the brains in AI just woke up like 6 months ago and said, okay, let's all connect together. And
So I'll say right now, the artist feels, whether it's AI opening up a ton more jobs, like, literally like engineers or this sounds like just a great space for engineering, so like software engineering, prompt engineers, whatever it might be, data engineers, to come together and just like think about all these models. But the actual use cases somehow, like right now, it's been, like fun avatar profile creation, or, from like some of the work I've seen, it's like, game developers figuring out concept art, and it's like very artist, like building new generations. Like what else have you seen, or whether it's like in scenario, like what are the use cases for so many of these so much of this technology?
It goes more than just fun. And if you look at of course most of the 8 million people on the Midjourney Discord might be individual users, but if you look at all the stock image websites like Adobe and Shutterstock and maybe Getty, but Getty is kind of on the fence right now. If you look at others, they take a look at the most liked, or I think the most sold images on these websites, and currently these are almost all AI generated. The best selling images on the stock image websites are AI generated. And so the contributors to these websites, if they might keep doing content the traditional way, but if they want to make more money or be more prominent or influencing, they have to switch to AI, and some AI-powered creation. And that's pretty impressive. I've seen some numbers where like you see somebody switching to AI and starting selling pictures, even though they've been selling pictures for decades, or maybe 10 years. You see like an inflection point that was not happening for the past 10 years before. That's more on the like a design, marketing, advertising side of things. And then on gaming, I think it started lately, more like in late November, early December. But what I hear, what I think the industry is looking at is artists being able to iterate and innovate much faster than before. And I'm saying artists, not just developers. Before, the artist used to take maybe a week to say, to do like 10 ideas or that would be presented to a customer. And then the customer would choose a certain direction and keep going with the game. And right now it's like in half a day, if the artist knows how to properly control and leverage the AI, they would AI generate 100 ideas, which they would pick the 10 ideas that would be better than the one made for a week, and these ideas will be then presented to the customer. What a value! Like you save basically 4.5 days to do more. And then we hear game developers that were struggling more on the indie side of things, that were struggling to get art, either because it was too expensive for them, no matter what, or because the content on the store was too limited. Then these developers with no artistic background, suddenly they can do some kind of artistic creations, which was not possible for them before. There is, of course, jobs or some positions will be displaced, but like new things are popping up that are extremely promising. Yeah, extremely promising.
It's there's like the art-based use cases, which are I call it the calculator for the calculator for the creative mind. Essentially, it's a tool that helps you turn what's in your head onto paper really quickly. And the whole process, like say, for example, you probably don't know how a calculator goes through the bits and wires and transistors in order to get you what 257 times 143 is, but it gets you the answer in the same way that you probably don't need to understand the linear algebra behind what's going on in these models to still be able to use them in a proactive way. So the art-based use case is very clear to me. You're getting something on paper much quicker, much faster in a million different ways, oftentimes to superhuman quality based on like the quality of the model that you're using. In most art, like say for example, I want to make music. I've had a million songs in my head. If I could just describe the song I want to say or want to put into paper, it's like I want an Avicii song with like high bass synths and all these other things.
Avicii, wow, okay.
Yeah, I love Avicii. R.I.P.
Okay.
Like I want to get it from my head onto paper. It just really smooths out the creative process. But where I see a lot of the value also generating is just in like literal productive use cases. Killing Google is like a great example of this. Like being able to synthesize all the information on the internet and then turn it into an interface that you can communicate with in a natural language manner, saying, hey, like how does attention mechanisms work in ML models again? And then it gives you an answer and you're like, actually, like, can you explain it to me like I'm 5? Actually, can you explain it to me like I'm 3? Actually, can you use like this word this time and those sorts of things?
And the same should you, so that's a GPT-3 or ChatGPT, I would say, experience. Okay, longer, faster. I mean, I'm like using ChatGPT for every single customer email or like communication and so on. Like, okay, it's too complex.
Show me your tricks then. That's why your response was a little bit,
maybe, sometimes. I could like drop a text and say, I want 10 tweets. Oh no, sorry, 8 tweets. And then it would change everything. Well, the same process should be applied to images as well. So you can fine tune or control your image or visual content creation process. Okay, make it, I don't know, like more precise, low poly, voxelized, and then add one more character, add an helmet, add a weapon, make it like a wider angle or close-up view, but still on the same image that you are working on. Not by restarting from scratch like you do most of the time with Midjourney and the likes.
It's kind of like compositioning, I guess, right? It's like it's understanding the style, being able to iterate like layers on top of layers on top of layers.
I call it exploring. You can composition, but you can first explore a space by like throwing darts, and you try to find these targets that when you find a certain interesting target, you can restart from. And it's a complete different process than a very like linear one where you start with a sketch, then you add colors, then you do 3D rendering. It's very hard to diverge from that like linear deterministic creation process. And that's what bothers a lot of artists, and I get it, because it's not the way they've been really like educated, and it's not the way they've developed their artistic skills. And some people love it. I'm an explorer. I love to explore. But I understand why it creates some concerns beyond the IP issues.
Let's actually talk about, I guess, that side of it. Like, what are you hearing or feeling from like artists or like some of your customers or people that are are actually using the product?
Yeah, so from what I know from the first few surveys, we have 20% of artists in the platform, and we have about like 7,000 users. 20% are artists.
20%.
Yeah,
Okay.
from like a small first survey we've made. They love it. They specifically say and sometimes share on Twitter and others that it supercharges their creativity. Some are addicted to a point where they spend like hours on Scenario every day. As long as they can feel the output they see comes from some artistic activity from the end, because they fed the system with their data. They curated their data. Then they selected their models and they refined it. And so they can feel the output is theirs, which you might not get that feeling on Midjourney. Or, I mean, saying Midjourney, I could say any others, because you might feel that just a prompt might not be enough to be qualified or considered as like creative, like deep creative activity. There is like, okay, let's be clear, I'm not an artist myself, but I've heard from artists they like the pain associated with creation. It's part of the creation process. And AI removes sometimes a lot of that pain. And I was amazed sometimes showing Scenario or others to friends, like saying, look, of artists saying, look how amazing it is. And the immediate feedback was not about IP, it was like, well, it is not creation because creation needs some sweat, you know? And, but yeah.
It's like, do you like hiking, the process of hiking to the top of a mountain, or do you want to just get to the top of the mountain easier?
Or you want to get an Oculus and visit the top of the mountain in VR from your living room?
Everyone has different preferences. Me, I want the Oculus. That's great.
But it's actually kind of wild that 80% are non-artists, so they don't have a baked-in kind of like, they're just like, awesome, this is working, and maybe we didn't have any artistic skills or go any through traditional training, and this is just like bliss for that.
Yeah, that's right. Developers. So we have also comic illustrators. We have game board designers that might not be artists per se. I still believe, from what I've seen, and that might apply to Scenario and any other platform as well, that artists are still the best position to leverage Gen AI because they have the terms, they have the culture, they know how to describe things that nobody might be right. And I think some of them, especially you might have noticed this controversy in ArtStation, are very much anti-AI, but they are still the best people in the world to use these technologies. For sure. They might not realize it yet.
What I think you're talking towards is the concept of taste. You actually need to know what good looks like and how to ask for good. It probably looks like this image with these upscalers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like there's objectively good music, and then there's the music that's in my head, which is objectively bad. I probably have bad taste, and I also probably can't describe it in a good way. So I think like the real skill that's increasing in value is good taste. And then another skill that I'm seeing increase in value is the ability to utilize these tools and think with them instead of like understanding their capabilities and what they're good at and what they're not. Are you observing similar skills increase in value? Like, what do you think the future artist skill sets look like?
They will know the whole dictionary, like the entire dictionary. Even words that we might not think will have an impact on a generation might have. And then they will have tested all that dictionary with different models. That cannot really be automated. There is a touch. I'm seeing people, iterating around certain prompts and their favorite prompts that might be very hard to find. And some people are very against sharing their prompts, by the way.
I do it I'm not an artist. And I won't ever lie that I'm even remotely close. But when I'm in a Midjourney, I'm looking at the people that post a long, very like clearly engineered, string of text, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna take that, And I almost feel like it's like a cheat code a little bit when someone, like in the public, still probably like a newbie to some degree, but I'm like so bad that I'll string together a few words. But then realize I'm like probably just limited. My vocabulary, the way I arrange it, the signals that will actually result the results I need. I'm gonna look for what other people are kind of doing or like have thought about it better with a wider base of like vocabulary or knowledge.
But that's something DALL-E has observed, or OpenAI has observed, is most of the people getting on DALL-E first and still now have very, very, very small limited prompts. A dog walking on the moon, period. But the real prompt should be a beautiful brown dog with sunglasses walking on the moon with a cinematic Earth in the background and 3D rendered in the whatever. Like who makes these long prompts? Probably not you and I. You should either expect people to develop this prompt engineering capabilities, or you could make their life easier by fine-tuning a model already, or by adding other elements to the prompt in the background that they might not even know. And it's
suggestions or two.
Yeah. Not even suggestions. I mean, suggestions, yes, is one thing, or it could be you don't even know that, like, we as a company added on top of your dog walking on the moon a ton of other describers that will make your dog look much better than if you just describe it plain.
Little prompt magic, some secret prompt magic that they don't know about.
And that could be proprietary, and that could be a business model.
Potentially. I think what we're seeing now, I think prompt engineering is somewhat of an artifact of models not fully understanding people's intent. So as models get better, they will understand your intent more. So say, like, when you say dog walking on the moon, it might put a dog walking on the moon in like a picture. But say, for example, you had 3 anime generated pictures before it. Then it will understand the intent that you probably want that dog to be an anime style. And then additionally, like I say like hot dog flying in nacho cheese sauce, like you might have a hot dog, you might have nacho cheese sauce, but like, does it have wings? Does it not?
This is going to turn into a trend in everyone. That was the first thing I typed in Midjourney a few weeks ago.
Yeah, but it's like but you want it in 8K with like Greg Rutkowski style or what have you, like all these different like small little modifiers at the end. It should know that you probably want the most beautiful version of a hot dog flying in nacho cheese sauce.
Okay.
And that I think is going to come with better and better models. But prompt engineering will always be a thing. I could go on a million tangents, but I won't.
Yeah. So what optimizations right now do you think in the work you're doing? Is it kind of is it at the model level? Is there still, because I have to imagine to some degree, like the onboarding users, the user, like finding depth of what the result, like how do you think about it right now? And like where, what scenario or others, like where do you think, you want to take some of this?
The big pieces we want to improve, and by the way, it's not just our problem, but I think everyone's, are one, how to manage this huge amount of images that are generated. You can get lost easily. Yeah. So how do you further delete, filter, bookmark, favorite, share? But like by doing so, you also feed the machine some data to reinforce the system or the engine. That's the UX, I would say, UX side of things. And the other one, which I'm extremely excited about, is more the API that we develop, not just to bring this technology to developers or game creators, but to also bring that technology to the end of the gamers that might be able to AI generate content in-game, provided that the game studio or the game company has integrated some engine in the game. So you just want the contest, the battle, the whatever, you win the potion, but it's not going to be one of the 100 potions designed in the beginning. It's going to be you describing the type of potion you want. And maybe depending on your level, you might be authorized a certain freedom in the prompt. And then, so like it's going to explode, like the amount of content that can be generated in the gaming space. It's not just a few million developers, it's 1 billion gamers, right?
Yeah.
Potentially.
I think it would just still be really cool to, using your potion example, when you kill a monster in, let's say, Diablo Act 3, you get a sand, like, the potion is adaptive to your class or to the class of the NPC that was killed. It's not just the same red, and I'm sure you could do this without generative AI, but I think take that times every little asset, all the weaponry you get, there's a little bit of detail sprinkled on it, or it just looks so much more immersive that in combination, it's like more immersive games versus like entirely new genres. I think just at that level, I'm like, I can't, like, that would be so cool to have.
Mm-hmm. It's a personalized experience in a lot of ways. It's
100%.
Like it's one part personalized towards, say, like every single object in the game state is catered to that object versus, say, there's a certain limit on how many pieces of art you can make in a game. Like, sure, you can have the elf potion, you can have the goblin potion, you can have the final boss potion, but like if you have 100 potions and 10,000 enemies, like you're probably not going to make a different potion for all of them.
100%.
So like you want AI involved in that. And then also you probably want, and I believe this to be the case, you want a personalized game experience in a lot of ways. Say, for example, especially in single player games, like if you're going through Ocarina of Time, you have a companion with you the entire game, Navi. And she's like tutorializing the experience at certain points, like, but those points are like pre-configured based off of like certain amounts of deaths or hearts lost. Like they're going to be like points.
Lester, don't enter the water temple. You're like, you've died too many times prior to that.
Yeah. All of those things. Yeah.
And what I love seeing is when the degrees of personalization is really down to the individual level. Like make a game based off your family history, based off your neighborhood, based off your city, your campus. Your like think of it like not just make a copy of Red Alert like I've tried doing kind of like I was inspired by Red Alert or Fallout, like big games I've loved, but like no, like let's apply a concept to like my own life or friends or experience and by the way GPT-3 or ChatGPT or whatever comes next could help writing these stories, these scenarios by like teaching the machine like, okay, write me a game scenario that's about my family. The answer would be immediately, okay, what does your family look like? Okay, tell me more. And then based on the description, you would have the characters. The characters will be then AI generated visually in other places. So you can combine different AI generation models.
You know what I think about like in all of this? Like how it would be so incredible. But I'm like, when a game like that exists, and I'm thinking about the first time, like we talk about this a lot, like the first time user experience when you log in, and whether it's like creating your avatar, which we talked, it'd be just way cooler if instead you have to like slide around and do the eyebrows and the nose and everything. If it was just like the photo to thing, it just works, and it's just like, oh, it
shout
looks
out
great.
Ready Player Me.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I just love that, and I love just that personalization. But I think eventually when you want like your life story, or like where is that locked up right now, or like do you really want to sit there as a player and do all the inputs and like go through all of that? Well, no, it might be easy if you hook up your Facebook account, or like like you give them a library of your Google Photos, or like I think we've been building such identity on some of the big like Web2 or like the big tech platforms that I'm curious when that happens if users will be like, yeah, have all of my my family photos, or like what's the privacy there? But it could be such a magical experience if you allow it to be, but it's also this like whole privacy thing as well.
Yeah.
But I do think personalization will be like so incredible if you can surrender to like how good the experience will be.
Well, if you know what you're getting into, I feel like it's a choice. It's a user choice. Like I want the personalized experience or not. I think people do this in subtle ways. Like if you used to have a Wii, you would maybe make a me for yourself, and then also like your dog, and then also for your mom and dad. So like you have your family involved in the experience. It's like you're okay with it, but like what are you willing to give up? Like publicly available pictures of you and your family online? For me, like I'm totally cool with that. Like
same kind of,
yeah. And like sure, like my background's online, all of this good stuff. I think there's like small things that games could do to make it like more personalized, like say the personalized avatar, or just like a horror game where I remember reading a Reddit post on like the Oculus subreddit where it's like Resident Evil 4, really scary game. I think one of the main villains in the game was saying like, Kyle, I'm coming. And like the guy's name was Kyle. And I was like, he's traumatized for life. Like that.
Because it oddly serendipitously was his name. And
I think you're fully immersed in that game. Like Resident Evil 4 in VR, like it doesn't get scarier than that sort of thing.
But if that could be Susan or Jack or Emmanuel or Lester, like if that was the voice that came in.
Yeah, all of those different things.
Yeah, another.
Or like what if like the character kills your mom in the game? Like, shh, bro. Like, I'm gonna. I want to beat that final boss.
Yep. Okay, I'm excited for that. I mean, not the mom killing part, but the idea of
the idea of the mom killing.
Yeah. I'll watch you react to that.
Yeah. That would be. I think the first game that really utilizes AI and NPCs in the first way is going to have like a viral GTM like hit. Like there are a lot of memes in Skyrim of like, oh, I took an arrow to the knee, and so like I'm now a guard for life, sort of thing. I think like once there's a game that has really fun, there's gonna be a lot of fun viral content that comes from the NPCs in games. I bet you like a lot of streamers are gonna find a lot of really interesting content playing with like the local tavern in like the next Elder Scrolls game if like AIs are involved, and then just like a lot of the spontaneous interactions that come up.
Well, I think what you're, like the technology, if adopted, and if the games have their own generator models like integrated, or have an SDK to so another company that's kind of like building that, I think that would be it feels like outside of the cosmetic or some of the artistry and like the game development process. I feel that to actually impact some elements of gameplay or features, like that is kind of the next evolution here.
Every single game element can be or will be AI generated or AI powered at some point. You start 2D, 3D, voice, sounds, stories, worlds, buildings, levels, VFX, animation, new movements. And the only thing that I think will not be AI generated immediately is the engine itself.
Yeah.
But if you look at both Unity and Unreal and what they're selling, and the asset store they have, and the tools that they have to create game content, a lot of like Gen AI will have an impact on all of them, except the physics of the game engine, like how to arrange the game itself.
Yeah, the rules of the game.
The rules of the game.
Yeah,
yes,
like the games are structured forms of play. Like the rules of the game decide everything. I agree with you. Like maybe like the strongest form of generative AI in games is that you don't even need like storage anymore for your assets. It's just everything is generated at runtime, and you only need a renderer, and you only need an engine, you only need the rules. I don't think that's like gonna happen in like a reasonable amount of time. But it's a cool thought experiment of like, what does the strong form of this look like?
No, but text to games assisted by or powered by some engine is something that could become a reality in a few years.
Yeah.
Where if the process can be cut down into like the right flow. You start a game, and instead of starting with Unity, you start with ChatGPT, and you start, okay, what is it about? What is the story? And you start interacting with the machine, and then they suggest characters, and they suggest visuals, and they suggest a background or a map, and then they also help you to find what's the goal of the game. Is it like, I don't know, battle royale? Is it like about, I don't know, anything like, armies fighting together? And other stuff that have not been invented yet. But text to games is a very, I think, attractive vision for people that want to create games but might not have the development skills or artistic skills.
Have you spoken with any? I know like the users are more like the artists or the individuals, but have you spoken to any like game companies or the publishers or designers or like developers that are just curious and like how do they react right now to it? Is like can't wait to adopt, or is there still the same trepidation that the artists have at the studio level?
At the company level,
yeah,
I think the general perception is like everyone is extremely excited and just can't wait to start scaling that. But the questions are still around IP, copyrightability, and then some sort of like ethics and like the impact it can have on brand. And so that's why the people that are the most excited and the most active right now, indies, individual artists, small studios, especially on the mobile side, because by the way, the unit economics make it so that it's very interesting for them. Yeah. For the AAA games, where the technology is not quite there yet, and they might not need to rush with the risk they have. Yeah. I think it's gonna take maybe 6 months, 3 to 6 months, whatever.
But that's no time still, though. Like that's not that.
It's
long.
Not years. Yeah. It's not years. No. And then we should expect in the next few weeks or months more and more examples to pop out. Like, look, GDC is coming in 2 months. I'm sure Gen AI will be a big topic of GDC.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious how you're thinking about the sentiment around generative AI with artists. Where is it? So huge outcry, like when it first came out with artists. And then I think it's died down a little bit. Would love to hear your thought on like the trajectory, like key moments in Rage, and then also where it is currently and where you see it in like.
It's interesting. Months. Yeah, key moments. I think one key moment was the ArtStation controversy, when people on ArtStation were putting like no to a
protest.
Protest. By the way, it's normal. Like people screenshotting others, like deliberately screenshotting an artist portfolio to feed a custom generator with somebody else's data. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving any IP advice, but like anybody should have a problem with that, I think. The second key moment, maybe the class action. Which is more recent, which was interesting because I think the way it's being described, there's a lot of wrong on the plaintiff side. The way they describe the technology apparently is fundamentally wrong. They describe it as like collage, and it's not how
it's not
technology
transformative, right?
So I'm not sure. I understand the controversy that happened on ArtStation, but I'm not too confident that the class action will go anywhere in the current form. And by the way, whether it goes in any direction, it doesn't matter. The databases still need to be carefully either, I don't know, curated, or people should have the right to opt out if they, for some reason, they have some content that they own in the database. What else? But I think you're right. I feel that the more artists tried out, the more artists understand the power, the less controversy we will see. So I believe the controversy will die down versus rise up and increase.
It's almost, I think about an artist who uses the tools. What would ever convince them to stop? It's like once you're on the workflow process, what would cause an artist to be like, no, like not going to use this anymore? Like, will that happen? Or like, rhetorical question, but I'm always curious, like once you start, I don't know, using a better piece of technology, like, can you go back to your Windows 95? Like, once you get in the habit of using it, it's like very strange, maybe different in the art, like this is that was probably a bad example, but like, can you really go backwards once you start using it, even in really small, use cases
you need to like morally hate it.
Yeah. Right. It's like a moral stance kind of.
It's like a bus riot sort of thing. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, like, I agree with you. So like, I think more people are going to adopt and realize that this makes their workflows better, not worse. Like in the case of coders, like they did a test with software engineers at Google where they had them use AI tools and not use AI tools. The AI assistants, keyword assistants, like not abstraction layer, but like assistant, improve their productivity by, I think, like above 50% on certain tasks, and improve their happiness with the job by over 50% on certain
happiness
tasks.
And productivity.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And I think like when you're not doing rote work that you don't like originally, and additionally like the AI is like best at doing this rote work, it's going to improve everyone's lives. Yeah. The question is like, okay, does it ever get so good that it completely removes your job? And then that's threatening.
Can I get meta for a second?
Please.
So our first our first chat on this,
I
was some of the the shtick was that I came up with all my questions to ask Jack and John on ChatGPT. But oddly, when I want to go deeper, when I want to have this kind of conversation with a very specific like bleeding edge, kind of company, like more nuanced, maybe I'm just like a little bit lazier, or in some ways I shouldn't. Laziness would be not using ChatGPT, but I wasn't as compelled when I was like, there's a more nuanced, topic that I want to get into. So like maybe I'm not equipped with, doing background research, or maybe I didn't feel as confident that I was even going to get an output that could have been great. It is funny, like outside of first time experience, second time adoption, and like get returning users, Lensa, right? Everyone, great, looks cool. And then it was fun, and I still, everyone still has the profile picture, but they just didn't need it. I mean, kind of different, very different scenarios, but I'm kind of curious, like how you keep the engagement up, like long term, how do you get, every day I have to use this? You explained for some, right? Like some of the artists are using it for hours every day, but I think for the general masses, like when does it become, you need it, like you can't exist without, I think you're like a hyper example, right? Like it's you're insane, but
yes, I am.
Or like you desire it, but I think for the the kind of like everyday life person, the same way like search or like Googling or something, like how do you develop things where the engagement remains, one day?
Well, by not even, by making it so that the experience doesn't even look like a generative AI experience at some point. When like take Google image today, the image, you're searching for the image. Tomorrow it might be replaced by Gen AI, and you won't even feel that it's Gen AI. You will feel it's normal to get an image that looks like what you're just looking for.
I use Lexica all the time for image search. It's like completely replaced Google image search, which is a bad product.
But you look for an image that exists in the database of Lexica.
Yes.
Tomorrow you might even be happy with the image you just generated. And you might even like consciently realize you just generated it.
It's both the search and I'm not as familiar with what you guys are talking about.
Lexica, I don't know if Sharif is here right now, but he's running essentially a Google image, Google search image, I don't know like the right words, Google image disruptor. Essentially what he does is he scrapes all the stable diffusion images that exist and then embeds like the prompts and then uses clip to be, this is all like 2D.
Yeah.
Essentially you can just type into a text box and like based off of the text, figure out images that are similar to what you generated. So like say for example, you go on Google Image and you type like rainy day, like you might have a bunch of pictures of like clouds and rain and like maybe over the horizon, but you might not get pictures of like a melancholy mood. Like in the case of like this AI generator, you get like a wider breadth of images and things that are similar because just like these text models understand the embedding space of like literally just like what is similar to everything.
Yeah.
It's a better product.
And they are making an even better model based on these users like you and me looking for images. They're improving the model and making their own Lexica model that makes even better pictures for that rainy weather.
That's gnarly.
Yeah.
I had no idea. That's cool.
Yeah, and it's you could switch two tabs. Aperture is the name of their model, and Stable Diffusion 1.5. You could switch the two tabs, and you see like the visual quality is mind blowing.
It's gnarly. I know they did like Aperture, which is that for like human faces. It seems like they have like a human face model and a human body model and they plaster the faces on the bodies. I don't know what they're doing, but it seems like very high quality, like 8K, like human recreations of things. I like the idea though of like Trojan horses into getting more data to make your own model. That I think is
Moat,
like,
defensibility.
I mean, for example, Scenario is a great example. Oh my God, like question. Do the companies that you partner with give you access to the data that they're using to train their own models for you to train models?
No, not quite specifically yet. Okay. And I spoke to a few large enterprise. I mean, like we have investors, angel investors from Riot and Epic and Blizzard, and they are specifically aware of that. And they said like we're gonna review carefully twice. I mean, we just started a month ago, so it's not like I've got tons and tons of examples, but I've had the discussion about companies having the need to review the TNCs carefully. But that's where the individual users might not care as much about it than the others. So there will be a balance where maybe a lot of training data will come from the individual users. And in exchange, they will get probably some sort of like access for free or for a better price to a service that they might not be able to pay. And on the other side, the enterprise users might pay a premium, but might have a dedicated cloud, dedicated TNCs, dedicated private data privacy, data security, and so on.
Classic SaaS.
Classic SaaS. And like the first bucket might feed the other bucket with proprietary data and intelligence to improve the outcome.
I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah. Oh, it's not just an idea.
Write that down. That's great. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So, I kind of wanted to find, there's no real easy way to wrap this up because it almost feels like it balloons and there's so many ideas and so much expansiveness, but maybe as a effort to kind of wrap, like what are some of the, I think it's just like so much optimism. Like I hear from both of you and I think from most of the people, artists included, there's just like a great amount of optimism. I think you've kind of addressed some, the different little disruptions or kind of still real considerations around ethics and IP management and everything else. What are is that the limitation? Like what are the existential threats right now of generative AI? Is it open source going private? Is it like databases going offline? Like what are some things that just completely like boom, what's happening right now? And it's just like, oh yeah, everyone's really optimistic, but then that happened.
Yeah, there are a few things. So these are thoughts, and let's not put any like.
I'll give you one answer, and then I'll go to because I think you'll probably go off.
My biggest fear with the whole AI stuff is that we've squeezed the majority of the juice in terms of accuracy. So like if we're approaching global max in images, like how much better can it really get? Or how much better can like text models really get? How much better can 3D models really get? Like we've squeezed the juice.
It's like your internet example before. Like the internet's like completely maxed out and you've just like crawled it and it's there.
It's like I don't know. Like a good example of this is like you go to chess. Like literally, like what is it? What do these elo curves look like? They're S curves. Like it's S curves across the board. It's like goes up and then like eventually it like learns the game and then it like plateaus and grows like slightly more over time. What gives me optimism that this isn't the case is that the more complex the task, the further away it is from human performance. So like chess is like slightly better than human performance, but if like you play tic-tac-toe, like I don't know, like it's pretty hard for an AI to beat you in tic-tac-toe.
Skill curve,
yeah right. Like in the case of like Go, like AIs are almost twice as good as the best human. So my guess is that like with really complex tasks, it's just like the human experience, like the breadth of the human experience is a pretty complex task, like all of the different things that you would do in it. I think AIs are going to be like superhuman in most of them. Yeah.
Wait, so what's the threat that we're hitting our S curve in a lot of
I think we're just hitting the cap
already.
I think that's like a real, like in image generation, I think it's like we're getting close-ish. Like in text, I think we still have a lot of juice left to squeeze. Like there are some pretty big domains that haven't been solved yet. Like code generation is like getting there, or like math is getting there, but it's not there yet. But I think that's probably one of the biggest bets. Oh, and then
biology.
Yeah, biology, all these. I could keep going, but I only got one.
Stop. Okay. Oh, that was a good. I mean, that's a scary one.
That's a thoughtful answer. I'd say bias, and then like how much the entities that control the database could put in a conscient or unconscious way some bias in their database. So it's not too much of a concern for image and visual content, much more for text. Like the way you feed GPT-3 will heavily, influence the output, and if you don't feed it right, it can spit some pretty bad results. And also the other thing is, I feel like again it's more text for text than image, but it could apply to image. I felt like ChatGPT or GPT-3. It's a very like uniform sort of experience and answers and style and text, and it gets pretty boring. So in that case, it feels like it's gonna degrade the creativity of humans creating beautiful text and books and words and sentences and so on. So that's my concern, that we have on one side a technology that can supercharge our creativity, but can also like significantly impoverish it, so to say. So, which direction it will go is still an open question.
I love that. Well, I feel like we've plugged. I was going to say at the very end, like I would love for you to plug everything you're doing, but it's kind of the core of a lot of the conversation. Getting here. I think this was a very deep conversation as a follow-up to kind of like how we started. Talking about this, just like a few weeks ago on the first pod, but my brain, I'm like, my brain is racked on thinking about this. I'm still optimistic after everything you've said. I think it's like so incredible, the business opportunities, the amount of startups that are entering the space.
It's insane.
I think there's a lot to look forward to still, and I'm generally still excited and optimistic here.
Yeah, there's a lot of good left to come.
Well. Yeah. Thanks for hopping.
Thank you, guys.
On this recording, Jack. Thanks for coming by.
Jack.
Thank you, FDOT Founders Inc. here in Fort Mason for giving us the space, the nice equipment, and everything to record this. It's been super fun. We'll maybe check in towards GDC and see what the next 3 months look like.
Absolutely, it's gonna be wild.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Lester.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right.